We will now call the meeting of the Waco City Council on September 12, 2023 to order at 1:35 p.m. Would you please join me for a moment of silence? Thank you. Welcome to all of our guests and visitors. We provide an opportunity for the public to address the City Council on any agenda item or during the hearing and visitors portion of the agenda. Is there anyone registered to speak today? If not, then please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First item on today's agenda is work session 2023-693, and Assistant City Manager Paul Kane will introduce the speaker.
Thank you, Mayor. On an annual basis, the city is required to review and have council approve the city's investment policy in accordance with the Public Funds Investment Act. Today we have Assistant Director of Finance Rusty Hill and Scott McIntyre with Hilltop Securities, who's our city investment advisor, here to provide an update on the policy and the changes to it for the upcoming year, provide a report to you on how the program is performing in the current investment climate. And following today's presentation at the September 19th City Council meeting, we'll have a resolution on the agenda for council to adopt and approve this update to the investment policy. So I'll turn it over to Rusty and Scott.
Okay, we actually have this as part of the presentation. It's a little, I think I've got it toward the back. So,
Looks like they have your slides up there.
okay, here we go. Should have been at the front, but I apologize for that. The Texas Legislature, of course, met in 2023. They did not amend the Public Funds Investment Act, so it remains the same. And the city's investment policy, which we reviewed last year and reviewed again this year, is in full compliance with Government Code 2256, which is the Public Funds Investment Act. And as a result of there being no changes to the act, there were no proposed changes to the policy. Having said that, your approved broker-dealer list did change very slightly. Oppenheimer and UMB Bank were added, and Cantor Fitzgerald and Citigroup were removed. Rusty had asked me the question about why Cantor Fitzgerald and Citigroup were removed, and to be honest with you, we would love for both of those firms to be active participants, and we would love for them to be able to show us great bids and offers ongoing, but they haven't. So our approved broker-dealer list is intended to show the best opportunities to our clients, and both of those were removed. I guess at this point they're in the penalty box, and to the extent that they actually have solid offers, we may look at re-adding them next year. But it's very, very straightforward this time. The legislature did not make any changes to the law. Your policy was already in full compliance, and we're not recommending changes this year.
All right, you want to walk us through the front portion in terms of performance and things, or?
Yes,
Okay.
and let me start with, if I may, let me start with the economy, because this all sort of feeds in. I promise I won't take up a tremendous amount of your time, but this is a very unusual time in the market. It has been for a long, long time right now. The Fed is trying to actively slow the economy down, and one of the reasons they're trying to slow the economy down is because, sadly enough, they're trying to slow wage growth. Goods inflation is actually moderated to the point where there isn't much of any, but service sector inflation is actually what's driving overall inflation. The labor market is starting to slow, but it remains resilient, very resilient. There's more jobs right now than there are people who are looking for jobs. That's a lot more in line with where it needs to be, but we're still looking at 1.2, 1.3 jobs per job seeker. The inflation rate has fallen significantly. Last June, it was 9.1 headline, and now it's closer to 3. It's going to get really, really difficult to bring inflation down beyond where it is going forward. The first part was easy. Second part is not going to be. Banking system, which had a lot of problems in March, is stable for now, but if you guys are regularly reading the paper, you know that there are a lot of commercial real estate loans that are coming due that are going to come due and be re-upped at significantly higher interest rates, and that's going to create some problems for scattered regional banks. Recession concerns, you know, when the year began, most people expected a recession was right around the corner. It didn't happen. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. Third quarter growth is actually stronger than second quarter growth, which is stronger than first quarter growth. So people are sort of embracing this soft landing theme where inflation comes down, but the economy doesn't crater, and we'll have to wait and see. I think that the rest of the year is going to be a challenge. The reason why is because the Eurozone is already in recession. And the Chinese economy, if you're reading the paper, is struggling mightily under really a real estate problem that they created themselves. So those are, you know, if you would consider us to be the largest economy, the Chinese economy is second, and the Eurozone is third. So it's really hard to maintain yourself if the other pillars are starting to crumble. And a government shutdown is very, very possible. It's not really in the papers very much, but the fiscal year ends on September 30th. I do not believe that there's going to be a budget passed, and I think that on October 1st, we're going to find ourselves in a government shutdown, which is probably going to be pretty ugly, in my opinion, in terms of the rhetoric going back and forth. The Fed may or may not be done raising rates. There's a meeting next week. We don't think that the Fed raises rates at that meeting. I actually am of the camp that the Fed will not raise rates again, that they've already raised rates as much as they're going to. But I do think that the Fed is going to continue to keep rates at this current level well into next year. So, whoops. Okay, very briefly, we'll go through these. Non-farm payroll growth is on the left-hand side, and you can see that, you know, over the course of a longer period, it definitely has slowed down the last 3 months. And I'll tell you why the summer months have increased in terms of payroll growth, and that's because the service sector is driving things. It's the summer. We take trips. We go to hotels. We go to restaurants, sporting events. So I expect that job growth is going to curtail as we roll into the fall months. The unemployment rate is still very near a 53-year low, just above it. So again, the labor market is very robust. One question that I always address whenever I'm in front of a council or county commissioners, whatever it happens to be, is where have all the workers gone? And a lot of people shake their fist at these workers who are too lazy to work, whatever the rhetoric is, whatever the story is. But that red line there is prime age participation, and at 83.5% for workers aged 25 to 54, that's the highest percentage in history. So there's a lot of people at the upper end who have retired, and a lot of what's going on in the labor market has to do with demographics. When you've got baby boomers retiring, they're not being filled at the lower end. So I think this labor market disconnect is probably going to continue, and that's going to mean that earnings are above where they normally are. Earnings growth in any given year might be 2 to 2.5%. It's still above 4%. It's been for a while. And that's going to be the stubborn part of bringing inflation the remainder of the way down.
So on the labor market, just since you brought it up, it's just really intriguing. But what you're saying is the participation of kind of eligible workers is at its highest in a very long time, but the cohort essentially is getting smaller because as baby boomers retire, there's just not a replacement generation of workers. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of folks on the younger end that are going to be moving up through college and get to the point where they're working. I think much earlier generations started work earlier than this generation seems to be. But again, at the end of the day, if there happened to be a stock market correction, I think a lot of people who were able to retire early probably go back and take some jobs that they hadn't.
Okay.
But yes, that's the gist of it, and that's the thing that is not completely crystal clear, is that the baby boomers are retiring and the jobs, the sheer numbers behind them are not what the sheer numbers were at the top.
There's a similar, probably the same trend in colleges, right? They're worried about this enrollment cliff in about 4 years from now that's going to start killing off a lot of smaller liberal arts and private schools, just given there's just not enough 18-year-olds coming down the pipeline, and it'll be interesting to see what that means too for the labor force.
Yeah, we're going to have to get creative in a lot of different ways. You know, I think that labor force is going to be, automation is going to step in. You know, we're going to see more and more automation. And in terms of what the colleges do, you know, the creative ones are going to survive, and the ones who aren't so creative probably won't. So we'll watch it. I'm going to skip that graph. This is a really interesting, this is CPI. This is the main inflation gauge. This is month by month. This is obviously CPI is what generates the Social Security COLA increase. So that's the one we pay attention to, even if this isn't the Fed's favorite gauge. But what I want to point out is those bars. The light blue bar represents the contribution made by the service sector to overall inflation. So you can see that light blue line was a very small percentage of overall inflation, and now it's the lion's share. Those gray lines that are now at the bottom, that's energy. So energy made the largest contribution last summer when oil prices were high. And at least right now, overall energy is actually a drag on overall inflation. So there's a lot of components that feed into it. Most of them are under control. The one exception is the service sector. Retail sales, I'm showing you this because retail sales consumer spending drives the U.S. economy. And as you can see at the tail end of that, the consumer is not anywhere near dead yet. There was a lot of spending that went on during the month of July, presumably in August. Again, that summer spending, again, that has to do with services, and we'll see what happens in the fall. The economy is doing just fine right now as we roll into the fall, especially since the service sector is driving it. And the service sector goes to sleep briefly for 3 months in the fall. I'm not sure if this is going to continue. Home sales, I don't really have to go into a whole lot here. The one thing I want to point out is existing home sales make up about 85% of overall home sales. You can see how sharply that's fallen off. One of the reasons is supply. It's because if you took out a 30-year loan last year at 3.5%, you're probably going to hold on to your house. So there's a lot of stickiness going on in existing home sale land. So the new home sales have stepped up. There are more homes being built in the pipeline, granted very, very slow build because they can't find workers, but more in the pipeline than there have ever been in history, believe it or not. So they will gradually come to market. They'll be more expensive than existing homes, and you know, the housing market has been a drag on the economy. Probably, generally speaking, will be flat to a drag for years, in my opinion.
Does that kind of suggest that more affordable entry-level homes is going to be more existing homes than new homes kind of going forward?
So unfortunately, affordable home space is being mostly relegated at this point to multifamily. So most of the building that's being done right now is multifamily. But I also think that there's a trend in place where I'm starting to read about homes that instead of being 2,000 square feet, 4.3s are now, you know, moving back to 1970s, you know, 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath that are more affordable because they're smaller and have a smaller footprint. Builders are going to have to figure that out. Did you have a question? Okay.
No, I was just in disgust about the way the nation is going.
I'm with you.
Yeah,
I do more head shaking, honestly, these days. So this is GDP. This is our report card. This is how we measure growth. It's quarter over quarter annualized. So fourth quarter of this year, 2.6%. Everybody thought we'd be in a recession by the first quarter. First quarter growth did slow a little bit, but second quarter actually picked up a little bit, and third quarter is actually running well above 3%. You know, you normally would cheer economic growth, except that the Fed is trying to orchestrate some slowdown, so we don't even know what to think. It's a good news is bad news is good news sometimes in the economy, but the economy seems to be doing okay. I want to point this out. I'm not going to talk about the dot plot on the right, but the left-hand side is the overnight Fed funds rate. So if that extended out to 2008, we were at 0 for 7 years, and then the Fed got the opportunity to gradually raise rates. They raised them to 2.5%. In 2019, for reasons I don't even know why. Chairman Powell decided to cut rates, probably to support the stock market, which is not something Fed chairman should do. And then we rolled into 2 more years at zero rates during the pandemic, and then the Fed has been almost unprecedented in raising rates to try to slow the economy down, to try to slow down inflation. And right now, we're in the range of 5.25 to 5.5. So that is actually the highest going back for, gosh, it's been 1997, 1998. It's been many, many years since it's been that high, and the economy continues to be pretty resilient. Again, I think the Fed is done, but I think they're going to stay where they are for a while until they actually start to see that growth moderate a little bit more, or at least until inflation seems to moderate a little bit more. And I will tell you, I'm sorry, I know you guys have your time, and I've told this story a million different times, but I went to a ball game the other day, and parking there was $45 on a surface lot. So, and our insurance actually went up by $300 this last period, and neither one of us has wreck in 2 decades. So the idea that inflation is going to come down, businesses are really happy about the idea of having the ability to be able to raise prices, and you know, again, here I am shaking my head. This is really frustrating to anybody who goes back to history to try to find some foundation for what's going to happen going forward. There's a lot of numbers here. The only thing I want to focus on, this is a Bloomberg survey of 70 U.S. economists. This was taken during the early part of August, so it's a little bit stale, but it's the freshest we have. That top line there is GDP, quarter over quarter, seasonally adjusted. So you can see that these economists expect third quarter is going to slow down. Fourth quarter is going to get very near stall speed. First quarter is going to be very near stall speed. So the nation's economists are expecting a pretty dramatic slowdown in the fourth quarter and into the first quarter of next year. They also expect that growth is going to be somewhat anemic going forward. The 2-year Treasury note yield, which is a good segue into the investments that we'll be talking about in a minute. Currently, today, right now, the 2-year is trading at a yield of about 5%. These economists believe that a year from now, it's going to be down to 3.73. So the trend for yields is expected to be down. That should help 30-year fixed rate mortgages, which actually were the highest in 20-odd years last week. But for right now, we sort of have to take the medicine that the Fed is doling out. This is really too hard to see. I'm going to skip it. The lines at the bottom really reinforce the idea that the market also believes that the trend for interest rates is down, that we've peaked already and the trend is down. So this brings us into the investment portfolio summary for the city of Waco. And I know this is hard to read, and my eyes are getting worse and worse, so if you guys are having problems with this, I'm in concert with that. The current yield as of July 31st is just under 4%, and you're probably asking yourself, why would the Fed raise the rate so rapidly? Are we not where the Fed is? And the reason why is because you've always had a diversified portfolio, which means you bought securities all along the way, and as you move forward and the Fed raises rates, you have the tail of old securities that have to move through and mature. Having said that, your days to maturity is only 5 months. That's your average maturity. So you've got securities that are going to be maturing very rapidly, and they're going to mature at yields of 1, 2, 3, and 4%, be reinvested back at 5%. So if I had to guess, if we were talking about, you know, what does it look like when we're sitting here 6 months from now, you're probably very close to 5%, which is some real earnings. You know, we went through that zero period where you weren't earning much. Your investment earnings should be good. As a matter of fact, that income summary there in the middle shows interest income for the month of July at just above $2 million. And again, I think that depending on where your balance is, we can expect that interest earnings rate is going to increase. Actually, I should probably say with amortization and accretion, you earned almost $2.7 million during the month of July. So this is the breakdown of where the investments are. So I think I would probably start with the top 10 holdings. The majority of the investments are in Federal Home Loan Bank obligations. we consider those agencies. You know, there used to be 4 major agencies: Freddie, Fannie, the Farm Credit Bank, and the Federal Home Loan Bank. Farm Credit Bank's never been a big issue, or Freddie and Fannie are under government conservatorship and are not issuing a whole lot. So really, Federal Home Loan Bank is one of the only games in town. Texpool, which is the Texas Treasury Safekeeping Trust Company's pool, about a quarter of the portfolio. U.S. Treasury obligations, 15%. You can read the rest as you go down. You know, the breakdown over on the right-hand side, you've got about 18% of the agencies, or the overall portfolio, is in callables, but right now, with interest rates so high, we don't expect any of those are going to be called. So, you know, those are going to be there. But I think diversification has been very, very good. You have a nice mix of liquid and fixed rate, and really the way this is positioned, you're going to have a lot of securities maturing between now and the end of the year to be reinvested. In terms of ratings, A1 plus is the top rating on the short end, AA plus and AA obviously you're familiar with. AAA is 75% of this portfolio. Very, very safe in terms of credit rating. That's always been the intention. The city of Waco doesn't take a whole lot of risks. Last thing you want to do is be on the front page of the paper. You want to earn a market rate of interest safely, and that's what's happening here. This is the portfolio overview by fund, and I'll just let you take a look at that. Of course, it all boils down to your weighted average maturity, but you know, a lot of those bond funds were invested back when your bonds were issued. So if you're looking at some that are invested with yields, for instance, of 247, it's when that was invested. And obviously, I think some of the ones that have higher yields to maturity were more recently invested. So the city of Waco, along with a lot of other clients, is very cognizant and mindful of making sure that you are doing business with a number of diverse broker-dealers. And so in this case, we're showing you the WBE minority women-owned business enterprises breakdown. And we always go out and include, where we can, businesses that are historically underutilized. 85% of trade offers through the first 7 months of this calendar year have included MWBE firms. They've been awarded over 81 million of Waco security trades so far in 2023. And that's a commitment that we make as well, not only to the city of Waco, but to our other clients. So we have a number of dealers on that we utilize. I will say that everything is done competitively. We include, but we certainly wind up, you know, passing that business to the most, to the best offer. We have a fiduciary duty to do that. So, which brings us to the policy review, which I've already done, and I probably have spoken more than you ever expected that I would today, but does anybody have any questions or anything I can go into any more detail on?
Questions? I don't have any questions, but Jim Holmes, our council member, couldn't be here today, and he sent me an email, and he's got about 18 questions. I'm going to start going through these. The first question is on page 12, on the bar graph, on the third line. I'm just kidding, Paul.
That was awesome.
I was about to move for adjournment, Mayor. Please,
Touche.
help me out here. Pull the fire alarm.
We have another council member who we dearly love, but would have been asking a lot of questions about some of these bar charts and graphs. Had he been here. I don't have any questions. I really do appreciate the MWBE stats, and that might be something even as we accumulate a list of things that we're trying to do to be conscious of equity, to add that to our list as a staff, to make sure that we note that. But I appreciate this summary and the fiscally prudent and conservative approach to investments that the city takes, and believes that we're doing what we can do to steward what we have well, and in what is a volatile market with uncertainty. So appreciate your delivery of this presentation, and appreciate staff's work to get us here.
Well, thank you all very much. We appreciate it as well.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now recess the work session and reconvene regular session at 2 PM. The next item on the agenda is Resolution 2023-694. Is there a motion?
Oh, Mayor, is this the, I'm sorry, I don't have an agenda in front of me. Is this the
This is the interlocal
landfill?
agreement between the City of Waco and Limestone County.
I'll move for approval on that.
Second.
Second, any discussion?
I just want to thank again Assistant City Manager Paul Kane and City Attorney Jennifer Ritchie and countless staff
Sarah Rayleigh.
and Assistant City Attorney Sarah Rayleigh, of course, and our Director of Solid Waste for all their good work continuing to close this out. And so thank y'all for that.
Very much agree with
Yes,
that.
sir.
Very much agreed. Motion and second, any discussion? Please poll the council.
Bearfield?
Yes.
Borderood?
Yes?
Ewing?
Yes.
Meek?
Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the hearing of visitors. Is there anyone here to speak on this? If not, we will not even open the hearing of visitors. Are there any announcements council would like to make? If not, then we will adjourn this meeting at 2:01 PM. Thanks all.